In 1900, a British doctor in Shanghai performed an X-ray on a Chinese woman's foot. What he saw made him step back in horror. Every bone was shattered. Her 4 small toes were bent completely backward, tucked under her sole. Her arch was crushed into a 90-degree angle. And the entire foot, what was left of it, measured only 3 inches. But what made the doctor physically sick wasn't the deformity. It was her explanation. My mother did this to me when I was 6. And here's the truth history tried to bury. This wasn't an isolated nightmare. It was the first chapter in a global pattern where 3 different cultures, across 3 continents and 1,000 years, turned women into living artwork, beautiful, admired, and tortured. Today's first ritual is the one that demanded broken bones, endless blood, and lifelong agony. And it was enforced not by men, but by mothers. Imagine being a 6-year-old girl in 15th century China. You wake up to your mother smiling gently. Next to her is a basin of warm water mixed with herbs and a long white cloth, 10 feet long. This is not a bath. This is preparation. She takes your feet and soaks them, not to comfort you but to soften the skin so it rips less. Then she lifts your 4 small toes and snaps them backward. 1, 2, 3, 4. The sound is quiet, almost delicate, but it's the sound of your childhood ending. She folds the toes under the sole and begins wrapping the cloth around your foot tighter and tighter, pulling the heel and toes together until the arch bends and breaks. When she's done, you can't move a single toe. You can barely breathe from the pain. But this is only day 1. Every 2 to 3 days your mother unwraps your foot. The cloth is soaked with blood. Sometimes pus. Sometimes pieces of flesh. The toenails, forced inward, begin cutting into your own skin. Often the small toes turn black, rot, and fall off. That wasn't considered a failure. It was considered a blessing, 1 less toe to shape. A 17th century binding manual called Records of Gathered Refinements gave the exact rules. Begin before age 6, or the bones become too hard to mold. Tighten every 3 days, no exceptions. If the child can still flex her toes, you have failed. For 2 years straight, your arch is rebroken again and again as your foot grows. Every time it heals, it must be broken again to force it into the perfect golden lotus. 3 inches. No more. Walking becomes torture. Most women could not travel even half a mile without searing pain. Their entire body weight balanced on a crushed arch and a single big toe. And they carried this pain for 70 years. But here's the number that should stay with you. 10% of girls died during the binding process. 10 out of every 100. Dying for beauty, before they even knew what beauty meant. This was the price of becoming a silent masterpiece. Imagine a beauty ritual so extreme that once it was applied to a woman's body, removing it would kill her within hours. A ritual so unforgiving that the very thing meant to beautify her became her prison, her literal cage. And unlike foot binding, this one didn't break bones. It reshaped the skeleton itself. Our journey leaves China and travels west, deep into East Africa, to a region where beauty was measured not in inches, but in cylinders of metal. This ritual didn't just transform women. It kept them alive, until it didn't. This is the story of the giraffe women, and the coils that turned them into living masterpieces. In certain communities in East Africa, a girl's beauty journey began not at 6 years old, but at 5. 5 years old, when a child should be learning to read, running barefoot in fields, laughing with friends. Instead, she was brought to the center of the village where older women, mothers, aunts, grandmothers, waited with rings of hand-forged brass resting in their palms. They were polished until they gleamed like the sun. Beautiful, perfect, innocent-looking. The girl was told to sit. She was told not to cry. She was told this was the moment she would become a woman. Then the first coil was placed around her neck. 1 circle of metal. Just 1. But this was only the beginning. By the time the girl was 8, 2 more rings were added. By 12, several more. By adulthood, she wore 20 to 30 brass coils, weighing anywhere from 25 to 35 pounds. But here's what history hides. The coils never actually stretched the neck. That's a myth. What really happened was far more horrifying. The weight of the rings pushed the collarbones and ribs downward, compressing the upper torso and making the neck appear unnaturally long. Over years, the shoulders slope dramatically, the ribcage shifts, and the muscles around the neck weaken from disuse. The coils didn't make the women beautiful. They made them dependent. Because here's the part that chills the blood. By adulthood, if the coils were removed suddenly, the woman could suffocate. Her neck muscles would be too weak to support her head. And once again, just like foot binding, women were the enforcers. Mothers would tell their daughters, "Without these rings, you are nothing. Without them, no man will want you. Without them, you are not one of us." Identity itself became the cage. Every year, a woman had to undergo tightening. The coils were unscrewed, removed, and replaced with longer, heavier ones. The skin underneath would often be bruised, raw, or infected from years of sweat trapped beneath the brass. But she couldn't complain. Complaining meant weakness. Weakness meant shame. And shame in this culture was worse than death. So she endured the heat, the metal burns, the itching, the constant pressure. She endured it all. To remain beautiful, women learned to move differently, slowly, gracefully, carefully. They learned not to turn their heads too far, not to sleep without propping their necks, not to run, not to fall. A single fall could dislocate the collarbone permanently. And yet, despite the danger, the ritual survived for centuries. Why? Because beauty was only half the story. The other half was punishment. In some communities, the coils were also used as a weapon. A woman suspected of adultery, betrayal, or dishonor would have her coils removed. Instantly. No doctor. No preparation. No support. Just metal hitting the ground and a woman collapsing under the weight of her own head. Some suffocated in minutes. Others died slowly as their necks swelled, their airway collapsing without the artificial support. The ritual that made her beautiful was the same ritual that could kill her. And what makes this even more heartbreaking? Most of the time, this punishment wasn't ordered by men. It was other women who demanded it. By the 20th century, anthropologists arrived, fascinated by the exotic beauty. They took photos, recorded measurements, wrote essays praising the graceful, elongated necks. But they never wrote about the infections, the nerve damage, the suffocation risk, the lifelong pain. They never wrote about the quiet dread every woman carried. If the coils slip, if they break, if someone decides I am unworthy. Because beauty was not a choice, it was a sentence. And the women, trapped inside those shining brass rings, became exactly what society wanted. Silent masterpieces. We've traveled from China to East Africa, tracing the footsteps of beauty rituals that shattered bones and reshaped bodies. But now we enter the most disturbing chapter of all. The ritual that didn't die. It didn't fade. It didn't turn into a museum memory. It followed us into the modern world. Into the 1990s. Into the 2000s. Into 2025. This ritual isn't ancient history. It's not buried in old texts or forgotten villages. It's alive. Thriving. Practiced openly. And government officials pretend not to see it. This is the story of the Kayan women of Myanmar, the long-neck women, and the secret everyone refuses to talk about. Because while the world posts romanticized travel photos, while tourists pay money to pose next to them, while social media calls them beautiful, the truth behind their golden coils tells a darker story. A story of control, of politics, of invisibility, and of women turned into human exhibits for profit. To understand why this ritual survives today, you have to understand one thing. The Kayan women were never allowed to leave. Decades ago, during political conflict in Myanmar, thousands of Kayan families fled their homes and crossed the border into Thailand seeking safety. They were granted refugee status, but not freedom. Thai authorities quickly realized something. Tourists were fascinated by the giraffe women. Fascinated enough to pay. Suddenly, refugee villages were turned into tourist attractions. Not homes. Not shelters. Attractions. Women with coils attracted visitors. Visitors brought money. Money brought pressure. And just like that, a ritual that should have vanished a century ago was kept alive, not by culture, but by economics. If a woman removed her coils, she risked losing her income, her family's food, sometimes even her place in the village. The coils were no longer just symbols of beauty. They became shackles disguised as tradition. Look up the Kayan women online and you'll see glossy travel photos. Women sitting upright, smiling softly, wrapped in shimmering brass rings from collarbone to chin. Children with freshly added rings. Tourists standing beside them, grinning. What you don't see is what exists outside the frame. Refugee ID cards that restrict movement. borders they can't legally cross, coils they can't remove without losing everything, governments that claim it's their culture, while ignoring the exploitation. In the 1990s, some of these women attempted to leave the tourist villages. They tried to move to other parts of Thailand. They tried to apply for resettlement in other countries. Do you know what happened? Officials denied their applications. Because losing the long-neck women meant losing tourist revenue. So the ritual survived. Because their bodies earned profit. A typical Kayan woman today wears 20 to 25 brass coils, weighing around 15 kilograms, more than 30 pounds. But unlike historical practices, the modern coils are often heavier, thicker, and less flexible, made to look more dramatic for tourists. The effect is the same as part 2. The clavicles press downward. Shoulder blades angle sharply. Neck muscles weaken. Nerves compress. Breathing becomes difficult. Posture becomes permanently altered. A lifetime of metal leaves scars no one sees. But here's the part that breaks the heart. The women rarely complain. Not because the ritual is painless, but because pain is easier than poverty. Imagine being told, you can remove the rings, but then you and your children won't have food. And then imagine the choice. It's not really a choice at all. In the early 2000s, journalists visited the villages and interviewed the Kayan women. Many whispered the same thing. I don't wear these because I want to. I wear them because tourists come. Another woman said, if I take them off, my family will starve. But these statements never made it into travel brochures. They never made it onto Instagram captions. They were buried, ignored, sanitized. Because nobody wants the truth. The tradition is not surviving. It's being forced to survive. Some women have described feeling like dolls or decorations for visitors. Others have said they were discouraged from going to school, from working outside the village, from building normal careers, because the coils made them more valuable as symbols than as humans. The metal rings restrict movement, but the system restricts freedom. As in parts 1 and 2, the ritual begins early. Around age 5, a young girl receives her first set of coils. She beams with pride because the adults around her celebrate the moment. They tell her she's becoming beautiful, traditional, special. She doesn't know that she is being prepared for a future where the coils will determine her opportunities. Where her body becomes a passport, one that only allows travel inside a cage. Where removing the coils means losing her identity. And keeping them means losing her autonomy. By 2025, activists have tried to intervene. Some NGOs offer education, healthcare, even the option to remove coils safely. But many families decline. Because without tourists, without income, without government support, how will they survive? Beauty becomes a currency. And the girls grow up learning that their value depends on metal wrapped around their bones. Foot binding was banned. The neck coils of other regions faded. Many ancient beauty rituals vanished with time. But this ritual? It survives in broad daylight. Not because women demand it. Not because culture requires it. Not because tradition insists on it. It survives because the world likes how it looks. Because exotic beauty is profitable. Because poverty is invisible. Because governments look away. Because tourists don't ask questions. And through it all, the same pattern repeats across centuries. Women turned into living art. Admired from a distance. Trapped up close. Silenced behind a golden shine. As long as their bodies remain beautiful, the world will pretend not to see the chains. By now you've seen the broken bones of China. You've seen the crushing coils of East Africa. You've seen the golden cages of the Kayan women in 2025. And through every ritual, one disturbing pattern keeps returning like an echo through time. It wasn't men who held the girls down. It wasn't men who tightened the bindings. It wasn't men who added the coils, or pushed the rituals forward, or guarded them fiercely. It was women. Mothers. Grandmothers. Aunts. Older sisters. Neighbors. Midwives. Widows. Matriarchs. The guardians of beauty. The enforcers of pain. Why would women do this to each other, to their daughters, to the next generation, to themselves? The answer is dark, uncomfortable, and deeply human. To understand it, we need to look inside the heart of a culture, not at what people believed but at why they believed it. Behind every ritual, behind every tradition, behind every so-called beauty standard, one brutal truth reveals itself. For many of these women, beauty was not optional. It was survival. In foot-binding China, Girls with unbound feet were considered unmarriageable. Families with unbound daughters were seen as failures. A woman with natural feet could be rejected by every suitor, leaving her family economically vulnerable. Marriage wasn't romance. Marriage was survival, stability, security. A mother wasn't binding her daughter's feet to torture her. She was binding them because the world left her no alternative. If I don't do this, she will suffer more later. This was the logic repeated across generations. It's easy today to say, why didn't they stop? But when every neighbor, every teacher, every elder, every grandmother, every matchmaker is watching, resisting the tradition means dooming your child. A mother wasn't choosing between pain and no pain. She was choosing between pain now or lifelong suffering later. And so pain became protection. Cruelty became love. Tradition became armor. This may sound shocking, but history shows it repeatedly. In patriarchal systems, women often enforced the rules harder than men. Why? Because men built the system, but women lived inside it. Women understood the consequences. They understood the punishments. They understood what happened to girls who didn't conform. A man might say, tradition is important. But a woman would say, if she doesn't follow it, her life will be destroyed. In many cultures, men barely understood the details. Many Chinese men never saw unbound feet until their wedding night. Many East African men didn't know how the coils were tightened. Many Kayan men didn't realize how suffocation worked if rings were removed. But women knew. Women had lived through it. They became the gatekeepers because they knew the cost of rebellion. And deep inside, many believed, if I suffered through this, she should too. Pain is the price of womanhood. Trauma passed down as tradition. Here is the part most people never consider. For many women in history, the only power they had was over other women. They had no political voice, no legal rights, no property, no authority over men. But inside the household, inside the rituals, inside the world of women, they held full control. Foot binding was performed by women. The coil ceremonies were led by women. The punishments for removing rings were decided by women's councils. The beauty rules, the inspections, the judgments, all by women. Beauty became a territory ruled by them. A domain where they had authority, status, and respect. A mother who bound her daughter's feet perfectly was praised. A woman who tightened coils masterfully was honored. Women who maintained strict beauty standards were seen as protectors of culture. In societies stripped of female power, enforcing beauty traditions became a way for women to hold on to the little influence they had. It was twisted, but it was real. People think pain would stop these rituals. But pain never stopped them. Because identity is stronger than pain. Women weren't just taught that the rituals were beautiful. They were taught that the rituals were them. A Kayan woman without coils was not free. She was nobody. A girl in China with natural feet wasn't healthy. She was shameful. A woman in East Africa without a transformed neck wasn't strong. She was unfinished. These rituals became markers of belonging. Pain wasn't just tolerated. Pain became a badge of identity. To reject the ritual wasn't simply to reject beauty. It was to reject your family, your ancestors, your community, your culture, your worth. And very few people have the strength to stand alone against millions. Imagine a mother in ancient China thinking, I don't want to bind my daughter's feet. But what if she is the only one? What if her daughter is bullied? What if no man marries her? What if neighbors mock them? What if her daughter blames her later? Stopping meant risking everything. Continuing meant fitting in. People think culture is a giant force. But culture is actually millions of small choices made out of fear. In many ways, these rituals survived not because people believed in them, but because people were afraid to be the first to walk away. And women, who carried the greatest risk, became the fiercest defenders. These rituals didn't survive because women were cruel. They survived because women lived in a world far crueler than the rituals themselves. A world where beauty was currency, where pain was protection, where rebellion meant ruin, where conformity meant safety, where love meant enforcing the very rules that hurt you. Women didn't enforce pain because they hated their daughters. They enforced it because they loved them, and because they believed the world would punish them even harder if they didn't. This is the tragedy. Not villains, not monsters, just generations of women trapped in a system, trying to protect each other the only way they knew how. The sun had barely risen, and yet the village felt strangely awake, as if whispers were crawling through the narrow streets ahead of daylight itself. Inside May's small room at the back of Elder Hua's home, a bitter mix of determination and doubt twisted inside her. She had spent the entire night replaying Lian's warning, Elder Hua's confidence, and the frightened faces of the women who now looked at her as if she were more than she believed herself to be. She wasn't a leader. She wasn't brave. She wasn't anything special. She was just a girl who had almost died, twice. Yet every time she closed her eyes, she saw the chained woman from the old prison, the man beaten for defending his sister, her own mother's trembling hands cutting the last strands of binding from her feet. The memories were louder than her doubt. A soft knock shifted her from her thoughts. May. Lian's voice slipped in low and steady. We need to talk. May opened the door to find Lian with bunched brows, her hair half tied as if she had thrown it together in a rush. Her shoulders were tense, too tense. What happened? May asked, feeling her chest tighten. Lian stepped inside and closed the door behind her carefully, almost fearfully. They found Elder Hua's scrolls, she whispered. May froze. The room seemed to shrink around her. Where? She asked. Lian swallowed. At the riverbank. Someone dug up the place where she buried the coded messages. The guards didn't understand everything, but they understood enough. May's heart sank. Do they know about us? No, Lian said quickly. Not yet. But they're looking for whoever the new torchbearer is. They don't know it's you, but they know there's someone young involved. Elder Hua thinks someone is feeding information to the magistrate. A traitor. May sank onto the edge of the bed, fingers curling in the sheets. A traitor? But who would betray us? The same kind of person who profits from silence, Lian replied bitterly. Fear makes some people dangerous. May stared at the wall, trying to slow her breath. The walls suddenly felt too thin, their secrets too exposed. I'm putting them in danger, aren't I? May murmured. The women. The girls. Everyone who's been coming to the gatherings, they're all at risk because of me. Lian knelt in front of her, gripping her hands. No. They are at risk because the world refuses to let them breathe. None of this is your fault. But Elder Hua. Elder Hua chose you because she sees something in you, Lian interrupted firmly. Don't throw that away. May looked down at their joined hands. She wasn't sure if she felt comforted or overwhelmed. A moment later, another knock sounded, this one heavy, urgent. Both girls stiffened. Lian stood first and opened the door only a crack. Elder Hua's tired face appeared, her expression sharp with urgency. Both of you, she said quietly, come with me. Now. They followed Elder Hua through a narrow alleyway to the old community hall, the abandoned place where their secret meetings had begun. Inside, a dozen women waited, all with tense eyes and clenched hands. Some looked angry. Others terrified. A vase shattered against the wall as soon as May stepped inside. She recoiled. You brought the danger here, a woman shouted. Another chimed in, those scrolls exposed everything. The guards are searching homes. They questioned my husband. May felt the sting of every word. Elder Hua raised a hand. Enough. But the fear in the room was thick, choking, and louder than wisdom. She is a child, a man's voice snapped from the back. It was old Ji, the village storyteller. A child should not hold the torch of rebellion. She isn't just a child, murmured someone else. She survived what no one else could. Twice. Maybe that's the problem, the first woman fired back. Misfortune follows her like a shadow. May felt her legs weaken. Lian moved forward protectively. If you blame her for the cruelty of others, then you are no better than the magistrate. The room erupted in noise. Arguments. Accusations. Fear disguised as anger. May could barely breathe. Elder Hua finally slammed her cane against the floor. Silence. Everyone froze. Elder Hua's voice was calm but carried the weight of decades. The guards discovered the scrolls, she began, because someone chose fear over courage and sold our secrets. A murmur rippled through the crowd. That traitor, Elder Hua continued, is still among us. And while you waste time blaming a young girl, the real enemy slips deeper into our home. Her gaze swept across the room. May felt it burning into her. You all forget, Elder Hua said, that the torch does not belong to one person. It belongs to all who carry it. And May, she looked at the girl with unexpected softness, has carried more weight in months than any of you have in years. A quiet hush fell. She is not the threat, Elder Hua said. She is the chance we have been waiting for. May's throat tightened. She didn't know whether to speak or simply collapse under the sudden shift in the room. Before she could decide, the door slammed open. Everyone flinched. A young boy stumbled inside, panting wildly. "Guards?" he gasped, pointing toward the street. "They're coming this way. Dozens of them." The room erupted into chaos. Elder Hua grabbed May's arm. "Listen to me," she whispered urgently. "This is the moment everything changes. Either you run, or you rise." May looked between the panicked faces, the approaching footsteps outside, and Lien's fearful but trusting eyes. Her heart pounded. Her breath shook. But something solid, fiery, unwavering finally settled inside her. "I won't run," she whispered. Elder Hua nodded once. "Then prepare yourself," she said. "Because the real fight begins now." The footsteps outside grew louder, heavy, deliberate, spreading through the street like a storm swallowing everything in its path. May felt the tremor of each step through the wooden floorboards. The women inside the hall clustered together, panic rising like smoke. "Barricade the back door," someone shouted. "No, if we block it they'll know we're inside," another argued. Voices overlapped. Breaths quickened. Fear had turned the air thick enough to choke on. Elder Hua leaned close to May. "Remember what I told you," she whispered. "Fear isn't the enemy. Silence is." May nodded, though her stomach twisted painfully. She forced herself to look at Lien. Her friend's eyes were wide with worry, but behind that, steady trust. Lien believed in her. Elder Hua believed in her. The girls they were fighting for believed in her. The guards' torches flickered outside the front windows. "We don't have time," Lien whispered urgently. "They'll break the door down." May swallowed hard. "No," she said slowly. "We'll open it." Everyone stared at her. "What?" 3 women exclaimed. "Have you lost your mind?" Old G snapped. May took a deep breath. "If we hide, we look guilty. If we run, we look weak. But if we face them, they'll be forced to listen." "Guards don't listen," G muttered. "They follow orders. Then we'll make them question those orders." Her voice shook a little, but her resolve held firm. Before anyone could argue again, a fist thundered against the door. "Open in the name of the magistrate." Another slam. Another. The wood strained under the force. Elder Hua gave May the slightest nod. May stepped forward. Her hands trembled as she lifted the latch. The door swung open. A dozen armored guards stood before her, torches blazing, swords sheathed but ready. Their captain, a sharp-faced man with a deep scar across his cheek, looked down at May with thinly veiled contempt. "You," he barked. "Step aside. We've received reports of illegal gatherings. Spreading lies. Incitement." May swallowed. "No lies," she said. "Only truth." Murmurs rose behind her, but May didn't turn around. The captain sneered. "Truth? That's what criminals always say." May raised her chin. "If speaking truth makes me a criminal, then so is every woman who has ever cried out in pain and been ignored." A few guards shifted uncomfortably. The captain's jaw tightened. "Where is Elder Hua?" May stepped slightly to the side, revealing Elder Hua standing tall despite her weakened frame. The captain smirked. "Still causing trouble, old woman?" Elder Hua didn't flinch. "The only trouble here is the fear you and men like you depend on." A flicker of annoyance crossed the captain's face. "Enough. Everyone inside this hall is under investigation. Anyone who resists will be dragged." "Then drag me first," May cut in sharply. A gasp rippled through the crowd behind her. Even the captain paused. May's pulse hammered, but she didn't back down. "I'm the one you're looking for," she said. "I'm the torchbearer." A shocked silence fell over the hall. Lien whispered, "May." The captain's lips curled. "So you admit it?" "I admit nothing except this," May said loudly, forcing her voice to carry down the street. Neighbors began peeking through doors and windows. Shadows gathered. Curiosity grew. Every one of us has a right to speak. A right to question. A right to exist without being silenced. "Young fool," the captain spat. "Rights are given by those in power." May took a single step forward. "No. Power is given by those who refuse to stay quiet." The crowd that had been watching from the shadows began inching closer. First a few women. Then a handful of men. Then elders. Children. The street slowly filled. The captain noticed the shift and stiffened. "Disperse," he barked. "Return to your homes." No one moved. A woman stepped forward from the crowd. Then another. And another. One voice rose. Then a second. Then 10 more. Dozens of women stood with May shoulder to shoulder. The guards exchanged uncertain glances. May felt something ignite in her chest. Not fear. Not anger. Strength. For the first time in her life, she wasn't alone. "We aren't hiding anymore," she said. The captain raised a hand, ready to signal the guards to push forward, but a single, wavering voice interrupted. "Leave the girl alone." It was an old man, bent-backed, leaning on a cane. Then another voice, "She speaks the truth." And another, "We stand with her." Soon, the whole street rang with layered voices, the sound swelling until even the guards hesitated. The captain's eyes darted from the crowd to May. He was losing control. He hissed at her, "You think this changes anything?" May met his gaze steadily. "It already has." Elder Hua stepped beside May, placing a hand over the girl's. "For decades," Elder Hua said, "I carried the flame alone. Tonight, look how many carry it with us." The captain scowled, then gave a curt signal. The guards sheathed their weapons, slowly, angrily, but they stepped back. "This isn't over," he growled. "The magistrate will hear of this." "Let him," May replied. "We're done whispering." The captain glared one last time, then marched his men away. The crowd remained frozen until the guards disappeared around the corner. Then, it happened. A cheer rose. Quiet at first. Then loud enough to shake the night. Women embraced. Men exhaled in relief. Children laughed. Elder Hua's eyes glistened. Lien threw her arms around May. "You did it," she whispered. May shook her head, tears finally spilling. "We did it." Elder Hua smiled. "Tonight, child, you were not the survivor. You were the spark." As the village gathered around her, May realized something she had never understood until this moment. A spark was small. But small things, when fearless, could set entire worlds on fire. And tonight, their silence had burned to ash.